Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers. Good afternoon, Keith.
Good afternoon, Bill. It's regular season time. We are actually going to have football on the television this weekend.
Yeah, I know.
You ready for
it? College started a little bit this last weekend. I didn't see anything because I was just kind of busy, but yeah, I'm totally ready for it, man. I mean, I was ready for it in April after the draft. You know, that's usually when the mini camps start, shortly thereafter. And then you get into the vets come in and there's just nothing. There's been nothing. And even the regular training camp time, we just saw a little bit of footage of guys warming up in the live broadcast that .com put on. And then we've been listening to other people's reports about what players look good and what players don't, who's doing what, and so forth and so on. And that's it. I mean, this is about as in the dark as I've been since the invention of the internet. And that's like what, 1990, not the invention, but when I got my personal computer, like 92, 93, something in there, I've had access to more information than I had prior to that. Now, when training camp, when you could go to training camp a little easier, and I've been over to Cheney a few different times back in the day, and over to Renton a couple times. And those are always awesome, but I haven't, since I've lived out of the area, it's nearly impossible. So I've been counting on guys like you to be my eyes and ears, but this year's on a completely different level of in the dark.
Yeah, it's been weird. It's just there's been no preseason games. We can't go to practice at the VMAC this year. It seems unreal that there's going to be games.
Well, there's going to be games on Thursday, so just 2 days, a couple days. It's going to be like waking up on Christmas morning. You wake up on Christmas morning, there's stuff under the tree you haven't seen before, and everybody's excited, and that's what it's going to be, because we have known quantities. I mean, there's a lot of vets on this roster, and there's a lot of guys that have played on other people's rosters, and there will be some rookies. There will be some contributions from rookies, and we can talk about those today a little bit. But for the most part, we kind of know what these players are expected to do. And, the Seahawks have kind of approached that as well. It seems to me like there will just be a very small handful of rookies that will have an impact over the first couple weeks of the season. You might see a guy like DJ Dallas get in on some passing downs and catch a couple passes out of the backfield. We all know that you're going to see Alton Robinson. He's going to take those Darrell Taylor snaps at the backup or in a rotation situation at defensive end. You're going to see some Jordan Brooks out there, I would imagine, at some point, taking some snaps away from KJ Wright. Maybe Freddie Swain, but I don't know if he even suits up on game day. What else, Keith? I mean, who else is there? Oh, actually, Damian Lewis at right guard, right?
Yeah, I mean, Damian Lewis is there. He's probably going to start. And the Alton Robinson at defensive end, like those are the two guys that I would expect to get major playing time. And then Freddie Swain, I do actually think is going to get some snaps, because when the team set the 53-man roster, it had 2 slot receivers on it, and now it's got 1, which with a move that happened today, not just today, but just a few minutes ago. And we will, discuss that here when we get to that part of the roster. But, really he's the key slot guy, unless you count Tyler Lockett, moving inside. And so I could see him getting some snaps here in
Interesting.
week 1.
Yeah. So before we get to the roster, today's kind of the look at the roster, the reaction show to the moves made over the weekend and continuing to be moved up until just a few minutes ago before we started recording. So we'll get to all that. Absolutely. Let's talk about the comings and goings, though, overall in the last few days. I guess the number one thing, just to get this out of the way, is no Clowney. So we finally figured out that whole sweepstakes, if you will. And, everyone kind of knows about the news by now, I'm sure, but it has been reported that the Seahawks gave Clowney up to $16.5 million with incentives, an offer back in, maybe it was $18 million or something like that back in March. Clowney refused. That number went down to 15 million plus change after the draft. Clowney refused. That number went to 12 just within the last few weeks. And that's when Clowney really started getting serious about shopping and got the Titans really involved. And then New Orleans and maybe another team, I think Baltimore maybe. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that he chose the Titans for $12 million plus $3 million plus in incentives. And I'm not sure if Seattle had an opportunity to match that or not. It's always said that they would have that opportunity. So either Seattle declined, or Clowney just didn't get them involved at that point. So regardless, I just want to make that clear because there's a lot of stuff out there about Seattle didn't come up to the table and make him an offer, and it ruined our season because now we don't have a pass rush and blah, 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 blah. Come on. It takes two in a party of negotiations to accept a contract. And if Clowney didn't want to be here, or Clowney thought he was going to get something else or have a different situation that would give him an opportunity down the road to make more money or whatever, Seattle just wasn't in that picture. And so you just have to move on as a franchise. And I think Seattle has. The question for me is, what's going to go on at defensive tackle? Do you have anything to say about Clowney before we kind of get out of that?
Well, you look at it, he misread the market. He thought he was going to get 24, and the Seahawks were offering, somewhere between 16 and 18 is what was reported. And he was like, no, I'm going to get 24. But that never materialized. And by the time I think he realized that it wasn't going to happen for him, the Seahawks had gotten tired of waiting and had signed Irvin and Mayoa. And now we're offering 12 because that's what they had left.
And that's where the market dictated. I mean, it did. 31 other teams made the same decision Seattle did.
Yeah. And then he was basically hit. I think he was sitting there waiting. He's like, okay, teams are going to get training camp and somebody's going to get hurt. You're going to see Von Miller go down with a torn ACL, and the Broncos are like, oh, we got to get someone right now. Or something like that happen. And then he's like, okay, so I'll be able to take advantage of that situation and get 16 instead of 12. And that never happened. And so he ended up waiting, and the Seahawks never came up with their offer. And he got some other teams involved. The Saints and the Ravens both, started talking with him. And then eventually the Titans were like, okay, we'll give you 12 plus 3 in incentives. And that gets him to 15. He's probably going to make 14 of those, on that deal.
Unless he gets injured.
But yeah, the 14, as far as like the likely to be achieved incentives, I think seems reasonable for him. And that's better than the 12 he would have gotten in Seattle. So
do you think Seattle made a mistake by not coming up and matching any and all offers and having Clowney in-house with this defense?
It's hard to tell. If they could have got him at 12, and if that was the point, and they could have been like, okay, instead of 12, let's make it 13 and get him in, then you do that. But I don't think that would have gotten it done. And at 15 or 18, the market didn't.
We could have gotten Everson Griffin for 6.
Yeah.
So
that to me is a much better bargain.
Yeah, what is going on with that? So they must feel real confident with their roster. And in addition, we're carrying 3 defensive tackles on the roster. Now, for me, and I've been around this game for a long time, that's the largest mistake of the entire offseason, because they went into the offseason literally saying out loud, this is the most important thing to address during the offseason, is the defensive line and being able to rush the passer, etc. And then they went out and gave Irvin a 32% raise to come here. I'm not sure that he needed to have that raise to get here, but they gave him that money. They brought in Benson Mayowa, who had a great year, but he's always been a rotational guy. Never had more than 40% of snaps in his career. And then they went and drafted a couple of young guys, of which they knew that Darrell Taylor was probably not going to be a go. You know, there was indications that was going to be a long rehab early on, and it's proven out to be that way. And then they really didn't grab really anybody else. So it's confounding to me. Not only that, but they didn't grab any defensive tackle to take the Al Wood snaps. So now you've got a defense that potentially will struggle rushing the passer. I'm not going to say they will, because on paper, I think they have a good chance too, but it might be tough early going. And then where are they going to stop the run? I mean, for me, that's the thing, is stopping the run. I mean, that's really a pillar of the defense, and they're not going to be able to do it.
I'm not worried about them stopping the run, because you have the two defensive tackles that you have experience are both good at that. And then you add, a 350-pound nose tackle as your backup guy. They're going to be able to load up that middle of the line. And then it's just a matter of, Rasheem Green and Collier, they're at 5 tech. They're going to be able to stop the run.
Well, just to be clear, Anthony Rush isn't even official on the practice squad yet. So I'm just making that statement.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, you have, you're going to be able to stop the run. I'm not as worried about that. What I'm worried about is you only have 3 defensive tackles. So what if one of them gets hurt? They go out week 1 and Brian
they've got Lattimore and apparently Rush on the practice squad.
True, so, I mean, but you know what I mean? Like, for the rest of the game, you have those two guys that are left have to play every single snap. That's unheard of.
It doesn't seem to be the right solution, but maybe they're just making it through this week, and after next week, when there's no guarantees on vet contracts, that they pull the trigger on somebody. Maybe that's what they're waiting for. Let's go through the rest of the kind of ins and outs of the roster in the last few days. Nick Bellore was cut. Then he was re-signed in his place on the Phil Haynes went to injured reserve. He's out a minimum of 3 weeks. Rashad Penny to the PUP list. We knew that was going to happen. He's got to go at least 6 weeks before he can begin to practice. So he's likely out, a couple weeks longer than that.
Where did you get 3 weeks for Haynes?
Because he goes on the list. That's a it's like I thought it was the there's a special reserve list this year, isn't there? I know that it's just for COVID.
For COVID, there's a special reserve
I thought
list
it was
COVID.
I thought it was also included for veteran players that are injured past the roster. This went through the initial cut down and then added to injured reserve, could be added to a short list.
Rather than it being 8, they moved it down to 6. I don't know where 3. I haven't heard that. So for me, I'm thinking,
I need verification.
He's going to be out 6 weeks. But so no one else was going to sign Nick Bellore. He's
correct.
A fullback-ish. He's an emergency linebacker on a team with a lot of linebackers. He's a fullback for 3 or 4 plays a game, but really what he is a special team standout. No one else was going to sign him. So they were able to cut him, knowing that he would be there 24 hours later. They could re-sign him, which allowed them to get Haynes on the 53.
With the ability, right.
Yeah, and then place him on injured reserve so that he has the ability to come back. Because if they'd placed him on injured reserve before putting him on the 53, he's done for the year.
Then we've got DJ Reed, Darrell Taylor, and Colby Parkinson on the non-football injury list that can return 6 weeks again before they can begin practicing, and then they can come back anytime after that.
The only difference between the NFI list and the PUP list, as far as going forward, is that the NFI list, technically, if they never end up playing, the Seahawks don't have to pay them. Whereas if you're on the PUP list, they still get their paychecks. So there's not a lot of incentive to use that if you're actually not gonna like stiff someone. But that's really what the NFI list is that the non-football injury is that it's the same as the PUP, but there is some stipulation in the CBA that will allow the team not to pay a player who got hurt.
All three of those guys entered camp with those injuries. Does that have anything to do with it? So they never played it down in training camp.
So did Penny. But Penny is not on NFI. He's on PUP. It comes down to when were they injured? And, were they on the roster when they were injured? Were they in the organization? And the answer is no.
Yes,
for those three guys.
Correct.
They were not part of the organization. They were brought in to the organization in an injured state, and that's why they're allowed to be on the NFI list. But I'm just saying, like, as far as logistics go, they might as well be on the PUP. It's the same thing. 6 weeks, then they can come back.
Seahawks kept Paul Richardson a week after bringing him in. That's interesting, only because of some of the other moves that they're making and so forth. I thought Paul Richardson would have a chance to stick around. He's easily the fifth best wide receiver on this group, but they chose to go in a different direction. Seahawks claimed a Sam Edge guy, DeAndre Walker, off waivers from Tennessee, originally a 5th-round pick in 2019, hurt his ACL before the first game last year, spent the entire offseason on injured reserve, came back this year ready to go, and he didn't make it out of camp. So that's an interesting signing, DeAndre Walker. Potentially gives you a little bit of an edge rusher.
Now they have 7 linebackers, and one of them is not Shaquille Griffin. Shaquem Griffin. That to me is weird. It's weird to me that they would go with 7 linebackers and do so without Griffin being one of them.
And including a guy they've never seen before in person. Yeah, interesting. So, we had talked about Shaquem being susceptible to being cut, not only this year, but last year I talked about it as well. And I think that the consensus was last year it just wasn't ready. You wouldn't going to give up on a player after 1 year, and they gave up on a player after 2. Now he did make it to the practice squad, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They waived Lindell Stevens after the initial cuts to make room for DeAndre Walker, and he was added to the practice squad thereafter.
Stevens had a really good camp. I know it's not a name that people are going to recognize.
And he's a guy that's a slot guy, a true slot guy.
Yep. And it's good to have him on the practice squad because he's a guy that I think can actually come up and contribute. He made the roster. Like, he actually made the roster. This isn't like a, just situation where, like, oh, we had a spot left or anything. Like, this is a guy who earned a spot. But he's
still on the back end. I mean, he's still like one of the 3 last guys, 3 guys you would cut first.
Which is better than the 3 guys that you cut before. You know what I mean?
True. So yeah, he made it to the practice squad. It's chances are Lindell Stevens will probably earn a spot at some point to come back.
He'll be back, if not with the Seahawks, with someone else. He will be on an active roster fairly soon.
Moments before we pushed the record button, Penny Hart was activated off the practice squad to the 53-man Seahawks roster for opening day. They waived John Ursua, a personal favorite for a lot of fans. They were kind of pulling for the guy. Kept around all last year on purpose on the 53 so that he wouldn't be susceptible on the practice squad to getting picked off. And he did not. He made it through the first initial welcome to the 53-man roster, and then bad news a couple days later. So what do you think about Penny Hart and John Ursua?
Well, I mean, they bring very different skill sets to the team, and the team decided that they wanted to go with Penny Hart's skill set. You know, on the active roster for week 1. But why don't you make that decision on Saturday? Why wait till now? That's the part to me that was weird, is you made the decision that it was going to be Urso on the roster and Hart on the practice squad when you made the 53.
It would have made more sense.
Why are you switching him now?
If they would have cut a different player from a different position group, it would have made more sense.
Yeah, I don't get why you set the roster one way and then 2 days later you change your mind and decide to flop spots. Because Ursula, I mean, he just got cut, waived. He wasn't really cut. He was waived. If he passes through waivers, they can sign him to the practice squad, and they will.
They will.
That's a given. But I don't understand the thought process here of making a decision and then changing your mind 2 days later. And we'll have to see. I mean, maybe there's more to it. Ursula did have a pulled hamstring for most of training camp, so therefore he didn't get an opportunity to really come out and show and all of that stuff. Maybe there's something to that, but he wasn't waived with an injury designation, so maybe he's not injured. I don't know. Maybe it was a matter of they knew Penny Hart would make it through waivers.
Well, he wasn't waived with an injury designation.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He wasn't. So we have to assume that he's healthy now. And so maybe it was one of those things where they knew that Hart would make it through waivers, so they didn't care. And they did that, but then it gave them an opportunity to figure out where Ursula was in his readiness to help in week 1, and they've made the decision that he isn't going to be ready. So let's go ahead and make the switch so that we can play.
That did give Seattle a guy that can play multiple spots. So he's got enough speed to play on the outside, but he's only 5'8". And this guy is a little lightning in a bottle type player. Mm-hmm. So very shifty, very fast, can play in the slot. That's probably where they'd use him. He also has the ability to return kicks and punts.
That's where I think this move happened. Was I believe they made a decision based on the special teams, punt and kick return duty. And Ursa was not going to be that guy. I mean, he could do punts, but he doesn't have the speed to be a kick returner. Hart does. And
so they've just FYI, Seahawks, and I've got a couple of interesting tidbits here to talk to you about, but the Seahawks came out with their depth chart, unofficial quote unquote depth chart, just within the last half hour. They've got Tyler Lockett as the number 1 kick returner and punt returner still this year. That surprises me a little bit. Mm-hmm. They've got David Moore backing up both of those. Okay. So it's interesting that Penny Hart would come up. Maybe something's going on with Tyler Lockett a little bit where they don't want him to return this week. I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
Or
it'll be interesting.
Maybe it's just they want to have a backup in case something happens to Lockett that they're not. Because David Moore...
Well, Amadi is the third guy.
Yeah. Moore is serviceable.
Yeah. He's sure-handed, but he's not going to be dynamic.
No, yeah, he's not a dynamic athlete. He's not going to do anything. Whereas you get a guy like Hart with that kind of speed and whatever, and he can...
Well, he's so small. It's like he can run right under you.
Yeah.
Nothing against short guys, but woo, this guy, I mean, you watch him on film, and I did just a little bit ago, just to see again, and he's just a little short, shifty guy. Mm-hmm. I think he's a $185, 5'8", $185 type guy, but he's pretty stout, 185, so he looks like a little bowling ball out there. It's kind of funny. So we'll see. I got another one for you, though. Before we move on to anything else, we'll talk about the roster and we'll talk about the practice squad. On that depth chart, they had LJ Collier beating out Rasheem Green for the base defensive end spot with the starters.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't buy it.
They had Rasheem Green as the number 2 guy in the rotation behind LJ Collier. I thought that was curious. You know,
That's very curious.
everything else on the roster on the depth chart looked normal,
Mm-hmm.
but that was the one thing I saw that completely stood out.
So the only thing that I would say about this with that depth chart on the official Seahawks website is something I learned when I was covering the team. That is put out by the media department.
Yep.
Not the coaches.
Correct.
The coaches
Absolutely.
actually don't have any input in it. They don't care. That is put out there entirely by the media department.
I did say unofficial.
In order to, it's basically for fans like us to look at and be like, hey, we have this information. And the coaches don't want to be saddled with having to keep this thing updated. They have it, and they don't need to be doing that thing for fans. They leave that to the PR department who handles it. I mean, they try, they do their best, and they watch practice, and they get an idea for it. But there's some things on there that have been very wrong in the past. And
yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see.
So practice squad, 16 players this year. Seattle had lots of players waived over the weekend. 15 of those guys out of 16 spots are Seahawks that they waived.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a lot of guys that are coming back, familiar names. I'll just go through those really quick. Danny Etling ended up beating out Anthony Gordon for the third quarterback spot on this roster and made it to the practice squad.
So Anthony Gordon, in the second scrimmage, pretty much played himself out of a job. He had 2 interceptions, one for a touchdown going the other way, and only had 4 completions, and looked completely lost. And that was at that point that Etling became available on waivers, and the Seahawks went and got him. And really, it became the team was no longer comfortable with Gordon as the third quarterback because he had played himself out of a job. And so that's really unfortunate because Gordon has the talent to be an NFL quarterback. He needs to work on his footwork, and clearly something did not click as far as the offense with him. But his tape is one of a guy that has the physical and mental tools to be an NFL quarterback. So I think he'll land somewhere.
It's a tough year, Keith. I mean, only 16 players switched teams after cutdowns.
Yep.
So almost everybody went back to their team's own practice squads. We were one of the very few get DeAndre Walker off waivers.
Mm-hmm.
One of 16 players to out of all the cuts, and we're talking 20. What is it? 24, 26 cuts players per team.
No, 27 players. Yeah, 27 players pulled per team. There's 32 teams. That's a lot of players that just got cut.
That's a lot of players that just got cut, and only 16 individual players switched teams to land on other people's practice squads or on their 53-man rosters. So, so as far as Anthony Gordon goes, it's going to have to be a pretty unique situation for him to land on another practice squad. Maybe Seattle brings him back. Practice squad rosters changed multiple times over the course of the season, so we'll see what happens. But I thought that was pretty interesting. All right. Wide receiver Cody Thompson. He had a great camp early, got her injured. They kept him onto the practice squad. Lance Lenoir, a guy we picked up midway through camp, wide receiver. Penny Hart, he was on my list, so I just said it out loud, but he's now back to the 53. Aaron Fuller, wide receiver. We're hoping to get John Ursula back there. Tyler Mabry, tight end. They were really impressed with Tyler's overall game. Not only a great blocking tight end, but apparently he did enough in the passing game where they're pretty excited about this guy. So we'll see what happens. Greg Olson's on a 1-year contract. Wilson's on a 1-year deal. And Disley, has some injury issues over his first 2 years. So a guy like Tyler Mabry on the practice squad makes a lot of sense. Tight end Stephon Sullivan is on there as well. There was talk early in camp whether he was going to be a wide receiver or tight end. They made him a tight end, even though Pete Carroll said he's a wide receiver after the draft. And so we'll see. It'll be interesting to follow him too. I'm excited to have him stick around because I think he's got a lot of upside. A big guy too. Offensive tackle, Tommy Champion. Chad Wheeler, offensive tackle. both back onto the practice squad. Chad Wheeler spent time there last year. Tommy Champion came in as an undrafted rookie free agent, so good on him. Cedric Lattimore, defensive tackle, another undrafted guy. Shaquem Griffin made it to the practice squad, so everybody's excited about that. He's getting another opportunity, hopefully, at some point. Again, to reiterate, teams can bring 2 players per week up to the active roster, and then they automatically revert after the game back to the practice squad. So it seems likely that he might be one of those candidates, only because of his special teams qualities. Jason Stanley, cornerback. He was kind of an upside guy, originally a wide receiver out of Georgia, I believe. Converted to cornerback, and so they want to keep him around to see if they can evaluate him further. Gavin Helslop, cornerback. Lyndon Stevens, cornerback, who we've talked about before. And Ryan Neal, that big guy. Big, fast, long guy. I think he's like 6'3", 209 pounds or something like that. They had him playing a lot of safety in camp. We had him originally as being a corner, so they might be switching him, throughout this process to kind of be a safety at some point. So that's it. And then the guy that was off of another team as well, in addition to DeAndre Walker, we ended up picking up Anthony Rush, a 350-pound, 6'5" behemoth of a human being to play defensive tackle. He actually has a little bit of experience too. He was with Oakland originally. Then he appeared in 9 games with Philadelphia last year, had 9 tackles and 2 bat downs. So here's a guy with a little bit of upside. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Anthony Rush is one of those guys that's activated to the 53 as well, just because of our depth issues at defensive tackle. So what do you think overall of that group?
I mean, I like the group. You've got a lot of players that the team knows well because they were here in town. The thing that interested me was the guys that weren't on that list. DeMarcus Christmas comes to mind. A 6th round pick a year ago, missed last year because of injury. A lot of expectation for him to come on and provide a pass rushing interior presence on the line. And not only did he not make the roster, they didn't even bother to sign him to the practice squad.
Yeah.
And so
there was only 5 guys that didn't make the roster that they didn't bring back.
And one of them was Gordon, and one of them was Christmas. And those are the types of moves that you look at and you're like, that's very interesting to me. And we'll see what happens.
Especially the other defensive tackle too, PJ Johnson. So when you take a look at both those defensive tackles, you're looking at one of the weakest defensive tackle groups in the NFL with the Seahawks behind, especially behind what they've got as starters, Ford and Reed. And you can't penetrate that roster, make enough of an impression to stick around, and then they don't keep you on the practice squad. That's not good.
Yeah, that's definitely an indictment on their training camp. So,
our scouting, unfortunately. You mentioned Anthony Gordon. Chris Miller was another guy. I'm surprised didn't end up landing back onto the practice squad, but maybe they like the upside of Ryan Neal better at safety than they do of Chris Miller at safety. So we'll see. And then Dibion Renfro was the last guy on that list, that cornerback. I thought he had some upside. He's got some pedigree in his last name, and we'll see. But those guys are gone, off the roster, gone. Kyle Fuller, guard, backup center, reserved, suspended list for 2 games. I highly doubt he ends up on the roster at all. They'll probably end up cutting him after this is all said and done.
Yeah.
And then Josh Gordon, wide receiver, who we did sign, but went straight to the suspended list. It's an indefinite suspension at this point still. No word from the league. Surprising. Now that we're in the first week, there's no way that he would be able to make the game at this point, even if they made that decision tonight.
But he hasn't practiced.
And right.
So.
Well, yeah, exactly. He'd have to go through protocol, all that stuff. So it'd be nice to be able to get that done. I don't know who on the roster he would take the place of, but I would love to have him on the roster for sure. So a couple of things too. That I want to say that don't have anything to do with the Seahawks, but could have implications for the Seahawks down the road. Cardinals are paying Hopkins a 2-year extension, $54.4 million in new money, $42.75 million guaranteed. That's just 2 years, folks. That's crazy.
But we're talking about
I
guy
know.
who's probably the best or the second best receiver in
top
the
three.
NFL right now. Depending on where you
Michael
place
Thompson,
him
Julio Jones.
Yeah, those two
Hopkins.
guys. Rank them however you want. Those three are the top three, and he's going to get that kind of money. I mean, so you're looking 2 years down the road what happens with DK Metcalf, but it's also 2 years down the road. We'll see what the market.
That's 2 years down the road, but holy cow, right? And then Kareem Hunt, running back for Cleveland, received a 2-year, $13.25 million extension with $8.5 million guaranteed. He's the number 2 running back behind Chubb. Gave him $13.25 million. That to me is a pointer to Carson, because if a backup is getting that money, what's Carson going to want? I think Carson's probably, depending on his year, if Carson has a really decent year, Seattle may elect to bring him, keep him around, and it might be a $10 million deal. If Carson has some fumble issues this year and he kind of barely reaches 1,000 yards because he's splitting a lot of time with Carlos Hyde, it might be difficult for Carson to accept the fact that he's going to have to make $7 million a year. So this contract to me is maybe a roadmap for that. Although it's, he's clearly a number 2 guy, so it's tough. That's a lot of money for a number 2 running back.
I mean, Hunt is a number 2 guy, but they're 1A and 1B with him and Chubb. And so they can make the case that, he's really a 1. And so therefore it's roughly the same as Carson, because Carson, even though he is the main guy in Seattle, he doesn't get 1,200 yards. He barely breaks 1,000 because of his injury problems that he's had every year. And that's a thing. Luckily, they got DJ Dallas and Hyde there to pick up the slack when he does get hurt.
Yeah, if there's the closest thing to Carson in the league, it's Chubb. If Chubb didn't have those injuries, Chubb would be like a 1,500 yards per season kind of a guy, and he's a brick house too. He's nasty.
He's a good running back when he's healthy. Very good.
All right, so let's go over the roster. So let's do the offense first. Let's just start right at the top. Russell Wilson. So Geno Smith, Russell Wilson. No surprises there. I'm glad Geno Smith made it through the noise. Geno Smith is a good quality guy and a good quality backup on this team. Russell Wilson, to me, Keith, looks like he's poised to have a breakout, if you can have a breakout year, as far as like an MVP race.
It's hard to have a breakout year when you were the MVP favorite after 10 games.
Yeah. After 12 even. They were 10 and 2. And he was right in there at that point.
He lost it to Lamar Jackson down the stretch because Jackson just went off.
Yes.
But
I've never seen a quarterback have more confidence than Lamar Jackson for his age and time in the league and stuff.
He was playing so well last year.
Yeah, he was scary. He was one of the only offensive players I can legitimately say scared me last year in facing the Seahawks. It was just unreal what he was able to do. So, and then Danny Etling is on the practice squad. So at running back, we've got Chris Carson. Glad to have Chris Carson back in the fold. It seems like he didn't miss a beat, even though he missed about 10 practices. Carlos Hyde is right behind him. That's a great 1-2 punch. I feel so good about this running back room right now. And DJ Dallas really came on and was the surprise, I thought, of camp. Surprised the crap out of me, Keith, because you'd been blowing his horn for a long time, right? Since he was drafted, and I just was late to get on board. But man, I'm on that DJ Dallas train. That's
his team.
He clearly beat out Travis Homer as well for that 3rd spot. And boy, what can you say? I'm excited to be able to see him. We haven't seen him yet.
Yeah, we haven't seen him play. I mean, he will be a guy who will get snaps. He will get touches in week 1. It'll happen. He looks like he's going to be the 3rd down back. Which basically means Travis Homer's probably an inactive. I would
imagine.
Unless somebody gets hurt. He also looks like a guy that could eventually get cut Rashad
Yeah,
Penny is
he's
healthy.
definitely on the bubble. Absolutely. Yeah, especially when Penny comes back. I hope Penny can come back this year. I'm rooting for the guy. I know he's been bashed and so forth. It's not anything that's really kind of been out of his control a little bit. Injuries happen. He didn't come into to camp ready. But I think he is now. Mentally, I want him to succeed. He's got the opportunity to come back, hopefully. I saw an Instagram post the other day that he feels like he's right on track and just missed it, the ability to come back to begin the year. And Pete Carroll reiterated that too, that he thought he would definitely be ready in a few weeks. So that's pretty exciting for him. Keith, what do you think about the wide receiver room this year?
The wide
seems like
receiver room is good, and it'll only get better.
I know. Well, it seemed like when we started this process, we had like 10 or 12 guys we all thought were just legit, could make the roster, right? So you had your top 4 or so, and then you had a list of about 6 more guys that you could just kind of interchange back and forth. And that process is kind of whittled down now, but we've got some good guys on the roster, some good guys in the practice squad, and then we've got a guy that isn't even reinstated into the league yet.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at the talent that they cut. They've cut John Ursua and
Cody Thompson, Aaron Fuller, Penny Hart originally.
I mean, I was thinking more along the lines of Richardson. That's my brain just skipped out
Paul
there for
Richardson.
a second.
Yeah.
Those are both guys that have very unique and high-profile skill sets that teams would love. And
I'm really surprised they kept Freddie Swain over Paul Richardson initially, because I thought Freddie Swain could probably make the practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of it too, is you've got guys here there's a lot of talent there. I mean, Sullivan is a guy that was highly touted, and he's not ready. He was a project. They knew that when they moved up to draft him. But they were bringing in a project in a good year to select a project because it was going to be easier to get a guy like him through waivers onto the practice squad. So, but even him, like that, he's such an intriguing talent that you're like, on a normal year, you'd be like, do they really want to cut him and expose him to waivers? But this isn't a normal year. And there's just a lot of talent there that has, had to be removed from the roster because there's only so many spots. And that's why Penny Hart getting added today is very intriguing, because there is something there that the team feels they needed to have on the active roster for week 1. And, he's the guy that they did that. And how he made the roster over Paul Richardson is interesting. It's just very interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree. And the fact too that they reiterated their belief in David Moore. They made that decision again. He's on the active roster. He's here,
which is kind of surprising.
We know he's been having up and downs. He's disappeared over long stretches of time. But when he's there and when he's fully engaged, he gives you something that's really nice for like a 4th wide receiver. And there's no question about that. Plus, he can return stuff. He's not going to be a dynamic guy that's going to take the ball all the way.
But he's got good hands.
He's got good hands. He's reliable. He's steady. That's hard to manage. Mm-hmm. DK Metcalf, dude. If there's a player on this entire roster other than Adams on defense that I feel like is a surefire player to have a really great year, he's just everything that I've heard and read and know about him from just his second half of last year. This guy is going to really break out this year. I mean, we're talking like Pro Bowl level type stuff. I honestly believe that 1,200 yards is within his grasp, and I can hardly wait.
Yeah, I am. Last year, we spent the whole part, like right now, leading up into the season, trying to tamp down expectations for DK Metcalf, because we were like, look, Seattle's a low volume passing attack. He's a rookie. This is a difficult scheme for rookie wide receivers. Just chill. He's going to be great, but great needs to have, more moderate expectations. And then he just blew us away. And we were like, okay, so we had all that, trying to tamp down the expectations for no reason. Now, my concern is that there is no tamping down of expectations. This guy is expected to come in and be an elite wide receiver.
I think mentally he's ready.
One of the top 10 guys in the NFL.
Yes.
He
takes over Tyler Lockett this year as the Seattle's best wide receiver.
Yeah. And
that's what we're talking about.
And that's going to be hard to do. I mean, Lockett's been great.
Lockett's a top 10 wide receiver.
Yeah.
He's
probably,
right there.
I would say
he's right there.
I would say top 15. I'd put him in the 10 to 15 range.
Tyler Lockett's one of the most efficient wide receivers in the NFL.
That's the thing.
I'll just say that.
Extremely efficient. And he does all the kick and punt return duties on top of it, which make him even more valuable. But, I expect DK Metcalf to eclipse Tyler Lockett and become the star receiver on this team and really it's going to be the Wilson Metcalf story.
Yes.
In Seattle for the next few years.
Absolutely. That's the most exciting thing for me, I think, is that Wilson and Metcalf are married now, and they will go together, in front of us, and their relationship will just continue to blossom. So that's pretty awesome. Tight ends. Will Disley's back. A little bit of a surprise that he's just able to go straight out of the gate after the Achilles, after the ACL. It's a testament to his work ethic and his mental fortitude to get back, claw his way back mentally after those injuries to get back to the point where, he's one of the two starting tight ends for the Seahawks. Greg Olsen's the other guy. What do you expect from those top two tight ends in this offense?
Big things. And just for the record, the first injury for Disley wasn't an ACL. It was a patellar tendon.
Oh, that's right.
Which is a worse injury. It is a far more difficult recovery to come back from that than it is an ACL. And I know the ACL is like the thing that, it's like when we think of knee injury, it's like, that's the bad one.
That's kind of where I went.
But the patellar tendon is actually worse. For him to claw his way back after that and be ready to go, only to suffer the Achilles tear, which I know I've said this on the show previously, very, very common to have a calf or Achilles injury in the other leg after a patellar tendon. But, and that's what's happened for him. And for him to be back 100% ready to go week 1 of training camp. So he's been there having a full training camp. This isn't a guy who's just getting healthy for week 1. He's been there from day 1 of training camp. Is crazy. His ability to get in and get those workouts in and get that rehab in and build the strength back up in that leg is impressive. It's hard to say just how hard it is to do what he's done to get ready. And yet he stepped through and did all of it. I'm really, really excited for that. And the offense was significantly better with him in it last year than without him.
Absolutely. And you duplicate that skill set basically with Greg Olsen.
Yeah, Greg Olsen.
And so now there's going to be no drop off there.
A couple-time All-Pro guy who can do everything. He can block. He can catch. He can run routes. He's a leader. That was a steal for the Seahawks to get him. Yeah,
I agree. Very undervalued pickup.
Yeah, and for him to be able to come in, those two guys are going to make it hard for the other two guys on the roster to get on the field because they're going to be playing a lot. The Seahawks are going to be playing a lot of 12 personnel, which means 1 running back, 2 tight ends. And they'll do that a lot. And those guys will both be on the field a lot.
What does that say about Jacob Hollister? Not so much Luke Wilson. Luke Wilson might even be inactive on game day, although he's a great special teams guy too. But Jacob Hollister showed us last year that he's got some real upside and that Russell Wilson trusts him. And that's huge in this offense. I can't understate that. Jacob Hollister came with like in 10 games or whatever, 11 games, had 45 receptions for 600 yards and 6 TDs or something, like 5
Yeah.
TDs, something like that.
He was very productive, and he's the guy who you're keeping him off the field, and you're like, but why? He was so productive last year. They're going to have to find ways to get him on the field.
Could he be as productive or more productive than our third wide receiver? That's going to be the issue.
I don't know.
Because you could almost play him in a slot type situation.
Yeah, but are you going to pull off the speed of Philip Dorsett?
It depends on how Philip Dorsett does with his foot. That's kind of a lingering issue, and
if Dorsett's not healthy, then your third receiver becomes David Moore, and you kind of know what you're going to get from him. And honestly, Hollister might be more reliable and more productive,
especially that he would be covered by linebackers, more or less, and so that might be a mismatch that the Seahawks might choose to exploit. During the year, different times.
The top three cornerbacks, or not, why did I say cornerbacks? The top three tight ends. That is a great position group, and then to have Luke Wilson, who is your jack of all trades, that can kind of do everything, and actually could play fullback if they needed him to.
What do you do with Colby Parkinson? Like Colby Parkinson's on the injured list. He comes back, potentially could come back after 6 weeks. And then I don't know what happens because you can't. You've got to cut Luke Wilson to make that happen, I think, or probably not Jacob Hollister. You wouldn't carry.
You spend an extra week getting him healthy.
There's no rush unless there's really a bad situation going on.
Yeah, and then you have 2 weeks before you have to activate them once they start practicing. And so you take, instead of it being 6 weeks, you drag it out to week 9 before you have to make a decision with him. And I think you slow play it as much as you can.
Just to see how the tight end position evolves.
Yeah, because, if Disley gets hurt again, which would be terrible. I feel so bad for that guy if that happened. But if he gets hurt again, you need a guy. So you call up Parkinson. Or maybe, Luke Wilson's...
Tyler maybe.
Yeah, or Luke Wilson's a guy that has had some ankle injuries throughout his career and has missed time. Maybe he's a guy that, rolls an ankle and you're like, okay, it's time to move on and get Parkinson in there and start working him in as a guy who can be ready for next year and that kind of stuff. And you just kind of wait and see. I mean, if all 4 of the guys that you currently have are healthy and productive and looking great, and then you have Parkinson waiting for a spot, that's a good problem to have, right? Because that means
Absolutely.
You have 5 guys that you love. And then you look at it and you go, well, Olsen's probably not going anywhere. He's a starter. Luke Wilson's on a 1-year deal. He's the odd man out, and you just let it happen. But even then, like, you're talking about cutting a guy that he's currently the 4th tight end. Most teams have 2 that they like, and then 1 guy who's just taking up space.
Yeah.
The Seahawks have 4 that they like, and
when you combine
to join them.
When you combine the tight end group with the wide receiver group and then the running back group, boy, this team is loaded.
Yep. They've done a great job of scouting skill position and bringing in talent.
What do you think about the offensive line, Keith?
I think the offensive line's going to be okay. Everything that I've heard is that Cedric Abuahi is he's the swing tackle. He's the guy that's going to be the backup at both spots. And he has looked good in both spots. Like, they've played him at left tackle against the ones, and he's done fine. So that gives them three players. They're 3 deep there, and if you need a 4th, you've got Jamarco Jones, who can play in there in a pinch, but you don't really want to lean on him as a starter or anything because he showed last year he's better off inside, where he played at a high level inside and was not nearly as good on the outside. And then at guard, you've got, it's sad to see Haynes not be able to stay healthy, because he missed most of last year because of an injury. And we both expected him to come in and push for playing time. And then he got hurt and he missed most of the year. And it wasn't until the playoffs that he finally got a chance to play and looked pretty good. But, it's the end of the year. And so it would have been nice to see him fight for that spot this year. But, the Lupati is what he is. He's, what you're getting. It's not going to be a very high level, but it's not going to be, Jermaine Ifedi bad, right? And then Damian Lewis, from all accounts, has looked great. It looks like he has, won that starting job, and
he won the starting job the day after the draft. I mean, the way that they were talking about him.
Well, kind of, but he had to come in and show it, right?
Which he did right away. I mean, there was no question. He did it right away.
Right away. He came in with a mastery of the blocking scheme and willingness to work, and just soaking in every bit of knowledge he could get from Mike Solari, the offensive line coach. Really took the training camp the way you'd want any rookie to, and just excelled. And the being pushed by guys like Jordan Simmons, and that never really happened. Those guys all were like, "Oh, if you're playing okay, let's move you to the left side and see you look over there," because Lewis just looks like a starter, and he just looks like a guy that you're going to count on.
So what did you think of Brandon Shell at right tackle? I mean, they were glowing about him throughout camp, so my hopes are up that he's going to be completely serviceable. I don't expect anything more than serviceable, so if I do get more than serviceable, I'll be very happy. But I just, first week out, he's going to face, who's the guy that used to be with the Rams, now with Atlanta?
Long.
Not that guy, the other guy.
Quinn.
No. The Rams' main pass rusher the last few years.
Robert Quinn.
No, the other guy.
I can't. One.
Now I have to look.
Let's see. The Rams and pass rushing defensive linemen. There's only been 800 of them.
Hold on.
You're thinking about Fowler, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, Dante Fowler. He's going to have to face Dante Fowler in the first week, so we'll see what happens.
All of that was me, basically. There was a point where the Rams' defensive line was as stacked a unit as you will find in any position group.
That's very true.
In the NFL. That offensive line, when you've got guys like, Robert Quinn and Brockers and God, they just had so many good Aaron Donald and
Fowler.
Long. And then they brought Fowler in to replace Long, and God, there was just so many good defensive linemen on that roster. And
they made life very difficult for Seattle. Even in their bad years, they made Seattle hate them.
Yeah.
So so you've got Dwayne Brown, Brandon Shell, Damian Lewis, Micah Potty. I'm missing one guy. It's kind of a special story. I mean, if you really think about it,
it looks like Ethan Posick has won the job at center.
We would have never predicted this.
No. Because going into training camp, that job was BJ Finney's. It was his job.
It was his job since they hired him in
They signed
March.
him specifically
$4.5 million guaranteed.
Center. They signed him specifically to be the starting center because he was a very good center for the Steelers. He played more guard than center because, he was playing behind an all-pro.
Mike Pouncey.
Yep. But he played both. He played both very well at high level, was very good at center. They signed him to be the starting center, and he just struggled to pick up all of the different cues in the running game because they don't play a zone blocking scheme for the most part in Pittsburgh. They play a man scheme. And so the cues are different. The reads are different. and he just struggled to adapt to the
Yeah.
new system.
I have
And
to
the
tell you,
team's
though,
like,
I'm
throw
pretty
Posick
happy
in
about
there.
for Posick, A. B, I hope he can stay healthy. C, BJ Finney does give us one more guy that can play both center and guard. So I feel better about now backup guard. So before we had Jordan Simmons, now Phil Haynes is hurt. Phil Haynes has been hurt before, but at least we got a guy like Finney that could come in. Now, of course, Jamarco Jones could slide inside as well. That gives them some options. But having a guy like BJ Finney's, even though we're paying him a ton to be a backup, I still think that makes me feel better this year. And then Kyle Fuller sitting there got suspended for PED use. And he's not back until week 3, if at all. So yeah, overall, I don't feel great about the offensive line, but there's only one unit on the entire team I don't feel better about, and that would be the defensive line. The offensive line to me will work together just like any year. Seattle really struggles a little bit in the beginning of the year, even if the guys have been together for 3 years. So this new unit, I like the new blood. I like the new faces. It just gives them another opportunity to go and be better together. And I'm looking for that. Brandon Shaw is better than Affetti. Damian Lewis is better than what we had before. I know everybody likes
Fluker was
Fluker.
good.
I know everybody likes Fluker.
he
As a
wasn't-
person, I'd take Fluker all day into war, battles, etc. But Damian Lewis is a better football player.
Well, we'll see, because he is also a rookie, which means he's going to make rookie mistakes. There's going to be some bad mistakes that's going to cost the team some drives. But on average, play to play, he should be more reliable than Fluker was, and hopefully it makes up for that. It would be okay with that.
I heard that Damian Lewis's recovery, meaning that when he does make a mistake, he recovers almost immediately to come back and at least get himself in the way of a bad play. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think Damian Lewis could end up being one of those guys that's going to be around the Seahawks for about 10 years. And
I hope so.
I know that he's a rookie and he's going to make mistakes. Yeah, I agree. But I think overall, I'm excited about him more than almost anybody else on the offensive line. So let's go to the defense, Keith. Let's talk about defensive tackles. Jaron Reed signed a new 2-year deal. There were folks out there that thought it was too much for him based on his 2019 performance, which included a 6-game suspension. But there it is. He's making $11 million a year to play 3-tech defensive tackle for the Seahawks. He's got the ability, if he can get back to that 2018 form, which the team does expect, and he expects for himself, we could be okay at defensive tackle. He could give us close to 10 sacks. He could play the run stoutly, and he hardly rotates out of there. That's the guy.
I mean, he spent his first couple of years as a nose tackle who was tasked with stopping the run, eating blocks, all that kind of stuff. And 2 years ago, 2018, they finally turned him loose at the 3-tech and said, here, go be disruptive instead. And he responded with, 10.5 sacks. It was a great year. Last year, he had a 6-game suspension, and he never really got going after that. He really struggled to make the same kind of impact.
And when he struggled, I think it made Poona Ford struggle a little bit.
Because when he wasn't in there and it was Al Woods beside him, Poona Ford was better. Poona Ford is a nose tackle. He is not going to be a guy that rushes the passer. He's short. He's like 5'11", but stout and wins the leverage battle consistently, in part because he's 5'11", and he can get underneath the pads of anyone he's playing against. But he's a guy that's going to be hard to move because he's got leverage, not a guy that's going to dive in between the guard and the center and be disruptive. That's not who he is.
Do you think the
He's a nose
Seahawks
tackle.
should expect more out of that position?
No, because that's what they
We were ranked what in Against the Rush, Pro Football Focused, Advanced Stats, DVOA, had Seattle ranked 23rd. against the run last year, and that was with Clowney, who's an excellent edge defender.
True.
Against the run.
It was with Clowney, and it was with Ford for part of the time, and Reed.
And Al Woods, though, was excellent against the run. He was the second-ranked defender against the run last year.
But it was also with nothing at the other defensive end spot.
Nothing. Correct. Nothing.
And nothing at the strong side linebacker spot.
Oh, yeah. We're talking Mr.
Kendricks.
Leading the NFL in missed tackles. Yeah. Kendricks.
So,
yeah. I love Kendricks, but he was not a great tackler.
Yeah. And so those were your edges. Those were your two guys that set the edge.
And Rasheem Green had an up and down year, and Collier gave you nothing.
Yeah. But your two main positions for setting the edge is the 7-tech defensive end on one side, the strong side linebacker on the other. Those are the guys that you depend on to set that edge, stop guys from getting outside, and funnel the runner back towards Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright. And they got nothing out of those two guys. And that was where the defense fell apart as far as a run defense. It was really because they were bad. I'm
very interested, A, how we're going to defend the run this year, and B, how we're going to protect our linebackers this year. I'm just not seeing it right now based on our limited defensive tackle group, but yeah, I'm hoping that one of these guys that we're going to talk about in just a second will come through sliding inside and maybe help that out a little bit. Now,
well, I think Brian Monet is kind of a wild card here. He played the very first week and played pretty well, went back to the practice squad, sat there for a while, came back at the end of the year, and played pretty well again. He was playing at like 365 last year. He's lost some weight. He's down into around 350. At one point he said it was 348, but now he's back to like 352. But he's a little quicker, hasn't lost that anchor. He's a guy who can be super stout in the middle. I like him as a run stuffer. Obviously, he's going to offer nothing as a pass rusher, but as a guy that can eat blocks, not be moved, fill a hole, and make it hard for a running back, like I think he's going to be good there. They need a pass rusher to come in and be that other position so that they actually have some push up the middle besides Jerron Reed. And that's going to be what you were leading into, which is Rasheem Green and or LJ Collier. And I think those guys, they're listed as a defensive end. They play 5-tech. They're going to slide inside, rush the passer from the inside the way that Michael Bennett used to.
And DeMontre Moore can do that for you as well. Another wild card that you mentioned, wild card Brian Monet. I think a guy to watch long-term on this roster is Anthony Rush. And he's currently hasn't been officially signed. I think he's probably going through some sort of COVID protocol or whatever. He hasn't shown up on the practice squad. That's where they said that he was going to land initially. Here's a guy I think that has more upside than Brian Monet, not only from stuffing the run, but also penetrating the pocket a little bit. He's at 350 pounds, and I would look for that guy maybe to make an impact long-term on that situation. But yeah, LJ Collier, Rasheem Green. I mentioned earlier, LJ Collier is listed on the Seahawks PR department's depth chart as the number one defensive end on the Sam side, strong side. And we'll see how that all works out because LJ Collier was really wanting to try to make an impact in camp, but it seemed like coaches were kind of giving the indication that we'd be better inside and might just be the primary backup to Reed overall, and that Green would take primarily most of the snaps, and then Irvin would come in as well on that side. So it'll be really interesting to see how they mash that all together, because Seahawks kind of blend their defensive ends, especially strong side, with their linebackers, and they kind of rotational activate those guys on passing downs. So you'll see guys like DeAndre Walker, who's listed as a linebacker, come in. Bruce Irvin will come up. Jordan Brooks will come up, even though he plays the weak side. He'll still be activated because he's so fast and so quick.
Yep.
and he does have
They'll
that
come up
that
and
skill,
play defensive end for a series, or a few snaps here
or a
and there,
blitz
and
stunt package, right?
yeah, they'll do stuff like that, and so their defensive end rotation is got linebackers in it, and their defensive tackle rotation has defensive ends in it. It's all about getting after the quarterback, and if you can get a guy with the quickness and strength of Rasheem Green in there in the three tech against the pass, he's going to win in times when another guy won't. Now, he's not going to stand up against the run as a defensive tackle, but against the pass, his quickness can matter. And
Yeah.
so you're going to see.
And Collier's like 290 pounds.
Yeah, so you're going to see guys move around. They do that a lot in Seattle. I know it's just one of those things that you see more of now in Pete Carroll's scheme than in the past schemes. When you look at under Holmgren or
Kind of a
Knox,
3-4 hybrid kind of a.
it is. It's
defense.
very hybridish in that they do use guys in different spots in order to take advantage of their skills. And you can't just go, okay, well, this guy's a defensive tackle like Rasheem Green, because against the run, he's going to get just beat up.
And that's when he gets hurt.
Yeah.
That's when he got hurt in college too, by the way,
And
when
so
he slid inside too much.
You need him to play on the outside a lot and move in occasionally. And that's what's going to happen. You're going to see him in there giving Jerron Reed some snaps on the sidelines, because guys got to only play 70% of the snaps if you want him to be at all effective in the fourth quarter. You got to keep his snap count down, and so you need someone to come in and rush the passer on third down. You slide Rasheem Green or LJ Collier in from the defensive end spot, and you throw Irvin up from your strong side linebacker. You bring him up to rush the passer there. That's the kind of situation that you're going to end up with in order to give Reed the snaps off that he needs.
So in the offseason, Seahawks hired journeyman Benson Mayowa to play the Leo spot. I don't know if they knew that he was going to be the primary starter at that spot when they did that, but here he is. He still gives you a ton of upside. I think he can probably produce pretty decent for you over there as a starter. And then behind him is a surprise addition to the team. It was a fifth round pick, right? Alton Robinson kind of took the snaps that you would normally have seen Darrell Taylor take. Darrell Taylor came into camp, was not ready to go, still is not ready. Started the season on the PUP list. So it's Alton Robinson getting some probably strong rotation snaps this early in the season. I would imagine Mayo is probably going to. He may.
Mayo is probably going to be the guy that's out there during the first series as the starter.
But we'll see how it goes.
But it's all about snap counts, right?
Yeah.
If Mayo is the starter and is out there for the first series, but only plays 40% of the snaps, and it's Robinson that's playing 60% of the snaps, then who is really the starter, right? Who's the main player at the position? I could totally see that being Alton Robinson being there. He just offers you way more against the run. He's got a ton of upside. That first step is just insanely quick.
He's been showing in camp consistently throughout too. So this is something we may end up being able to count on, which is awesome out of that spot. We haven't drafted that spot very well.
Offensive tackles are going to struggle to get position against him because
he's got
quick.
Great counters already, and it's for a young guy that's hard to come by. And then Darrell Taylor, and he's big. What did he come in at? Like Pete said, 175, and he was listed at 275, and he was listed at 259, I think, out of college.
Yep.
And then Darrell Taylor, at some point we can get Darrell Taylor back, hopefully, and add to that situation, which would be awesome. Because I would hate to see the Seahawks give up more draft capital because Darrell Taylor can't come back and we need help. So before the trade deadline, we end up shipping out, a second round pick or somebody to come in and help. Because here we are in a legitimate Super Bowl window with a legitimate roster that looks like it can challenge. And our defensive line is, easily probably bottom 5 in the NFL. just on paper.
On
Which
paper.
is
I don't know
hard.
if I buy that, because I think that as far as nose tackles go, Poona
Depth.
Ford's
I'm
going to
just saying
be
depth.
going to be
Is
pretty
not
high
looking
up
good.
there. The
Yeah.
depth is poor. I'll give you that. But Poona Ford's, nose tackles don't get a lot of press because they don't get sacks and they don't build up a lot of stats. But their job is to dictate where the running backs run by changing what the blockers have to do in front of the running back. And Poona Ford is one of the best in the NFL at that. I'll just leave that there. He is very, very good at moving the center and or guard into a spot
teams
that
certainly
forces the
did a
running
very
back to
good
cut
job
back.
at scheming around Poona Ford last year, because he didn't have a hell of a lot of impact in the center there, because teams were doing outside zones on us like crazy.
But that's the
because
thing
Alvstad was
they
horrible at setting the edge.
they were running outside zones because Kendricks and Ansa were terrible. And when they pulled Ansa, they put in Griffin, who is
Got
220
washed out.
pounds.
Right.
You're asking. I mean, they wanted him to rush the passer at 220 pounds, and he was semi-effective at that. But you're expecting a guy that small to line up against a 330
the
pound
quarterback's going to change the play at the line
tackles?
of scrimmage and run straight at Griffin.
Yeah.
If I was a quarterback, I would. All right. Let's keep moving. So let's talk about the linebackers, which is one of the most exciting groups on the whole team.
This group is good.
It's crazy. So I thought that the Seahawks would definitely go into the season before the draft with Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, and Cody Barton being the heir apparent at the strong side linebacker. And we would still be awesome because we had already signed Bruce Irvin to play strong as well. And so I thought those guys kind of split time, because Irvin would go up and rush the passer, and Barton would be in there as well. But this group after the Jordan Brooks pick is extremely intriguing. Now, I know Jordan Brooks has taken some time to come along in camp, but eventually this group is going to be probably top 5 in the NFL, if not closer to number 1.
Brooks is probably the most athletic of all the linebackers right now, which says a lot with when Bobby Wagner is out there, because he is an athletic specimen. But he's also hit 30 and is starting to slow down a little bit. So I would give Jordan Brooks as the nod as being the most athletic guy.
He just needs to learn.
Yeah. And he's playing behind 2 of the best in the NFL with KJ and Bobby there. He is going to be a good player. He is he may not play a lot of snaps these first 4 games while the team leans on the veterans a little bit, but he will force his way into the rotation. He will be playing significant snaps for this team.
Yeah, speed and instinct is hard to keep off the field.
Mm-hmm.
Griffin had speed up the yin-yang, but the instincts, and just being out of position. I mean, Shaquem Green should have been a safety, because at least he had a chance to be on the field and not get dominated or overplayed for his position. But as an edge or as a linebacker, he was always going to struggle taking on blocks and getting himself open.
He was smaller, and that's even before you get into the fact that he's missing a hand.
I'm not even counting that. That's neither here nor there, right?
But Griffin, he was undersized for all the positions the Seahawks asked him to play, and his twin brother is a cornerback. He has all the speed and all everything. He could have been a great safety, but he didn't play safety in college. He played middle linebacker. And so the team was like, okay, we can move him and use him as an outside linebacker. That's probably not moving him too much. Let him, use his speed as a pass rusher and that kind of stuff, and just allow those instincts that he spent years developing to be helpful for him. But he was still physically overmatched in that spot, and they really they were in a tough spot, because athletically he's a safety, but he's never played safety. He played linebacker, so they were trying to let him be a linebacker. I mean, it's just a weird situation for a guy that's that athletic.
Safety. This group turned into one of the most amazing dynamic groups the Seahawks have had in years. Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, Marquise Blair. I mean, right there, dude. That is Marquise Blair could probably start for at least a dozen teams right now in his second year, right? And then you've got Diggs and Adams. Adams is going to be one of those players that when you go look at the film, you're not going to figure out if Adams is a safety or if he's an edge rusher or if he's a linebacker or if he's a slot corner, because he's going to play all over the place now. I don't know if he's going to be as diversified as he was in with the Jets, where he only lined up like 80 times at strong safety for the Jets. I think he's going to line up at strong safety for Seahawks primarily, but he's going to be all over.
It's him lining up at strong safety, but what job are you asking him to do within the scheme? Are you asking him to drop into his zone? Are you asking him to cover a tight end? Are you asking him to set the edge against the run? What job are you asking him to do? No matter where he lines up, he's going to be asked to do all sorts of things.
And he's going to be the best player on the field when he does those things.
A lot of them, yeah. I mean, he is that dynamic of a player. He was an all-pro last year. I think that we need to continue to state that. This is an all-pro
It's hard.
talent.
It's hard to get so amped up on a player we haven't seen. I mean, yeah, we've seen some film, some highlights, but we're going to see him in action on every play now.
Those highlights came with him playing on a terrible team, too. He did not have tremendous talent around him with the Jets. And now he's got Griffin out there at corner. He's got Diggs behind him at free safety. He's got Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright at linebacker.
He's got Blair in the slot.
Or he's going to be in the slot and Blair's going to be at strong safety, because those two guys can both do both. You've got Ugo Amadi, who is now fighting for playing time, even though he looked like the guaranteed starter at slot corner coming in. But Blair has looked so good as the third safety that they're playing big nickel all the time, and they're not even using a third corner very often. They're playing three safeties instead because Blair's looked that good. But you still got Amadi, who is an incredible cover guy for a slot corner, and the whole system is designed around all of these guys are interchangeable. The one guy who's not in the safety room is Diggs, who's going to play free safety and be in the back the same way that Earl Thomas was. But everybody else can play multiple positions. Everyone else in that safety room can move around and do things that you wouldn't normally ask a safety to do, and do them very well. And it's going to make opposing offensive coordinators throw fits. I love it. I mean, even the one guy who we haven't mentioned is Leno Hill. He's a strong safety by trait, but the team has asked him to be free safety multiple times, and he stepped up and was better than Tedrick Thompson, the guy they drafted to be a free safety. Even though he's a strong safety in terms of body type and speed and athleticism, he was smart enough to get the job done on the back end. He's a guy that can do multiple positions too, and he may not see the field this year.
Yeah, and Amadi can play free safety and in the slot. So yeah, it's a great group. I mean, it may end up being my favorite group out of this entire roster. And then the corners, you had mentioned Griffin, then you've got Flowers and Dunbar.
Griffin's a Pro Bowler. Dunbar,
all three are seasoned.
Dunbar is a Pro Bowler, borderline All Pro. Those are your starters. Trey Flowers is coming off 2 years as a starter. One was good. Last year was less good. But he did perform better down the stretch. Now he's got a lot less pressure on him because he's got Dunbar in there.
Now, Quentin Dunbar, so some more text came out today that kind of further implicates him into that whole robbery scheme. I don't know if you read that or knew about that at all, but I don't know if they're credible or if it makes any difference at all. But the police department and the DA's office said it was from some warrant, not a warrant, but they were looking into Johnson, who's the coach guy, their friends, his cell phone finally got the okay to go in and break into it. And they recovered some texts that further say that Dunbar was there and all that kind of stuff. So anyway,
Here's the
don't know if it
problem with
makes
that
any difference.
is they had months to do their investigation and ultimately came away with, we think he was there, but we don't have enough evidence to get a conviction, so we're going to let it go. And now it's been it's been another month, and other information has come out, but even unless they get
it doesn't implicate him any further than just being there, basically.
Yeah, and okay, so he was there, but was he a part of it?
Well, Johnson said he and Baker directed it, quote unquote.
Yeah, but again, it comes down to if the evidence was there to charge him, they would have charged him.
I totally agree.
Instead, they announced that they were dropping the case against him and would not charge him with any crime. So more information, unless it's significant, is not going to lead to them just changing their mind and pressing charges. So I don't see.
Yeah. So, and he clearly, in a short time in camp, was the better corner, and it is a great opposite side of the field from Griffin. And when you combine Dunbar and Griffin, along with Adams, Diggs, and Blair, that secondary right there
that might be the best secondary in the NFL.
Is the best secondary in football. Yeah,
I have a hard time. Go around and look at the other secondaries that people will say are really good. Until a couple of weeks ago, people would have said Baltimore, but they cut Earl Thomas and they don't have a free safety to back him up. And just go around, like I said, go around and look at all of them. You are going to be very hard pressed to come up with a more talented group of proven Pro Bowl or all pro level guys than what Seattle has right now. Is it the Legion of Boom where they had 3 all pros? No. But they have
potential. They have potential to get there.
They have one,
especially if they work together.
They have 1.5 all pros and 5 Pro Bowl caliber guys, and that is, it's not just high quality. It's just the number of guys too, and then you got guys that can come off the bench like Amadi and Flowers, and they can perform. So I think this secondary is outstanding. To go along with the linebackers, the back 7 of Seattle's defense is outstanding. But that front four is where...
Yeah, if you prove me wrong and it's not back end of the NFL and it's more middle of the road, I think we'll be okay. Because
very good.
If we can create more than 28 snaps this year, which I think we can. I think we can get closer to 38 than 28. If we can do that and we can generate, let's just say 20 interceptions or combined 25 turnovers, 28 turnovers, this defense is going to be good enough combined with the offense to get to 12 wins. And that's why I went with 12 wins in my prediction show last week, is because I think this roster is good enough to do that if we can create pressure. I don't, maybe it's not sacks per se, but it's just pressure, disruption. If we can get into lanes and cause havoc to create turnovers, that's what it's going to be all about for this defense, is creating turnovers. When we create turnovers, we're taking the ball out of the offense and we're giving it to Russell Wilson. And with this offense, I think that if you create an additional 20, 25 opportunities over the course of a 16-game schedule, that's a lot. And and more often than not, Russell Wilson's able to take advantage, especially if it's on the other side of the field. It's if it's on the opponent 50-yard or in yard line, we're going to score. So
with that group of skill position players
and red zone opportunities,
Wilson's going to get his. I mean, he's going to perform, and we know he's one of the best in the NFL. And now you've given him a bunch of weapons to play with, and if the defense can get him a few more possessions a game, to use all those weapons and toys, he's going to have a monster year.
He's going to cook.
Yep.
And then we've got Jason Myers to make some field goals, and we've got Michael Dixon to flip the field, and Tyler Ott to make it all happen.
Yep.
That's the team. I mean, we didn't talk about a couple of guys, but we talked about the guys. We talked about the guys that count.
Yep.
This is going to be a good season, a good
it's going to be fun.
Good team.
Let's go watch some football.
We need
Sunday.
some fun, don't we?
Turn the TV on, watch some football, enjoy some adult beverages, and just enjoy the fact the NFL is back. Can we do that? Let's do that.
Taking on the Falcons, Sunday, 10 a.m. The regular season begins. I don't even care who the opponent is this week.
It doesn't even matter.
I don't even think the Seahawks care. They just want to get in front of somebody and hit somebody.
As much as like it feels like we should be previewing the Falcons. Do we know much about the Falcons? Because with no preseason games, and they had this big turnover on their defense, including their defensive coordinator. They jettisoned a bunch of talent in order to get guys they thought fit better scheme wise.
It's all about Matt Ryan, really. You know, he's a guy that really struggled last year. He was under a lot of pressure. It came on in the second half of the year. I think they finished 6-2, which saved Dan Quinn his job. Mm-hmm. But early in the year, they were awful, and we're catching them early this year, first game. So we'll see what happens. I think we show up. I think we take it. Like I said on Twitter, I predicted like a
5-0 start,
31-20. Was my score prediction on this
you had
game.
them with a 5-0 start, starting with the win here. I had them with a loss, not for any reason other than, I don't know, I figured they're not going to win.
You woke up in a bad mood. How in the heck can you get this team to 11 wins, Keith? You should be reprimanded. No.
Oh, I know.
I get
terrible.
it. I get it. No, it's the NFL's hard. I mean, teams are more equal than we care to admit, and it's hard to win. But God, with Russell Wilson, he's a difference maker for sure.
He really is.
All right. So there's our roster. There's our roster reaction show. And next week, we get to actually review a game. So we'll come back here next week and talk about the Atlanta Falcon game with you all. And thanks for joining us. You can find Keith on Twitter at MyersNFL. I'm at NWChawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. SeahawksPlaybook.com has all your shows where you can subscribe and find the show on any app and all that good stuff. And please do. That would be helpful. And then we have a new YouTube channel as of a couple months ago. And so we've got a few episodes on there. It's just kind of some scrolling images and all that kind of stuff in the background. But if you're a YouTube person and you want to listen to your shows on YouTube, we got you covered there. So until next time, Keith, Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWChawk, Keith is at MyersNFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.